Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett
Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got George Haymaker III. George, how you doing today?
Hey, Brett. I'm doing super. Great to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. How is the San Francisco, Napa Valley area? How are we doing out there today?
Wow, it's beautiful. The Major League Baseball season actually kicks off tonight with the Yankees and the Giants, and so that's here in town. And I mean, it's 75 degrees out. It's just a beautiful day.
Nice. Yep, we got the home opener tomorrow for the St. Louis Cardinals, so looking forward to that. It's supposed to be like 91 degrees tomorrow. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Last year at home opener, we had sweatshirts and stocking hats on.
Yeah, really mild winter this year.
Yes, it was. Well, again, you are George Haymaker III. You're a 35 entrepreneurial year career, ended up in burnout and health crisis, and you are now in applied neuroscience to rebuild your own cognitive emotional operating systems. You're helping people all over the country with that and helping leaders optimize clarity, confidence, decision quality, and sustainable high performance without relying on pressure, overwork, and burnout, man. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But like on every podcast, I start with, what has helped make you the man you are today?
Well, I think it was the experience I had of hitting bottom. I'm 65 years old, and 13 years ago, I hit a hard bottom from burnout and addiction. I had navigated my professional career being an entrepreneur, highly activated, stressed out, not really paying attention to my health and well-being, just performing, as many of us do. And it led to a bad place. And I, along the way, I was medicating my anxiety and stress with alcohol and eventually pain pills. I have a lot of addiction in my family, so the genes expressed, and it took a hold of me. And, I was in real trouble at the end and had to go to rehab. I just had to be separated from life for a while and figure this thing out. And I still remember 13 years ago, sitting in that 8x10 room, going through withdrawals, looking myself hard in the mirror saying, how did I get here? And how was life going to be different if it could be? It's not a great place to be when you're 52.
No. So talk a little bit more about that. So like you were obviously climbing the ladder of being successful and all that stuff, and I guess would work professionally all day, go home and booze all night, and then get up and go do it all over again?
Yeah, I mean, addiction takes a number of different forms. Like everybody's that becomes addicted, their patterns are different. For a while, I would only binge on the weekends, be good Monday through Thursday. We just try to manage it the best we can until it starts to manage us. So yeah, I was an entrepreneur. I grew up in an unstable environment, lots of moving around, different school every year, went off to boarding school in 9th grade. My parents moved overseas. I was heavily disciplined physically as a child. So I was really uncomfortable in my skin, and that's how I entered adulthood. And then I chose to be an entrepreneur. Interestingly enough, because it's a very stressful environment, I was already anxious and stressed out. So you put the two together, and it was like pouring gasoline on fire. And so the solution that my brain and I found was to get really wound up, perform like crazy, be successful on paper, but then have to calm it down with substances. And my brain learned that was very effective, and so it kept predicting that I should do that. So it kept sending me those messages in my brain. You're activated. Let's calm down. Let's go get a drink. And that's just how I did it for 35 years until it overwhelmed me.
Wow. And so going through that rehab and becoming sober, all that stuff, like what were the biggest things that you learned, after all the hell that you went through? What'd you learn the most?
Yeah. So as I was saying initially, I had no idea how my brain worked. I just assumed, like many people do, that it's fixed and that we kind of got what we got and perhaps we're born with it and there's not much we can do about it. And so that's how I just kind of went about my life. And so I stopped and I said, there's got to be a different way. I mean, not everybody's as miserable as I am. And so I took the time to say, well, I've got some time on my hands being in rehab. I'm going to start learning how my brain works. And so I started reading a bunch of books on psychology and addiction science, led me into the brain, neuroscience. And I just became super interested in the subject matter, apart from the fact that I needed to become interested in the subject matter. It was just super interesting. And it turns out the brain is just an amazing organ, and it's fully capable of all kinds of change. And it has a very specific design, and it's trying to do certain things for us in our life. And it's really super helpful when we understand that, so we can partner with it and guide and direct it. Otherwise, we're just kind of flying blindly, and we're experiencing life and just taking what it gives us without any intentionality around that. And that's just a really bad strategy. And so it took me some serious consequences to figure this out. And so, again, I kept learning and applying those teachings to my life. My life got better. And I said several years ago, I was looking to pivot out of what I was doing into another type of career. And I said, well, what do I have to offer the world? I've never worked for anybody. Why don't I just take this experience that I've had and help people understand how their brains work? And so that's what I do, whether they're struggling to whatever degree, or whether they just want to understand how the organ works so they can enhance and optimize their brain performance, whether they want to change their mental experiences. All of that is possible, but it starts with becoming educated on how this organ works and what you're dealing with and how to move and shift it. And so that's what I do now. I have a practice where I work with professionals that are into growth and development and want to know how they can get better performance. And by performance, I mean things like more energy, more clarity, better decision-making, more emotional regularity, calmness, excitability, like being able to control these different outcomes in life or states on demand, having a better relationship with stress, knowing when to employ it, when to cause it to recede. There's just a whole brain first approach to living that we can incorporate into our lifestyle and have it pay real dividends in terms of what happens every day in our mental life.
Yeah. Well, you chose the hardest organ to work with, didn't you? I mean, the brain is a crazy spot.
Yeah, but it controls everything, right? I mean, it kind of starts and ends there. And so it runs every system in our body. And unfortunately, that's the one that was struggling the most for me. So I had to go to the root cause.
Yeah. So let's just talk kind of high picture. If somebody listening to this, they want to be the elite performer, right? And elite performer, maybe it's at work, maybe it's at home, as a parent, as a spouse, whatever it may be. What are the non-negotiables that you're helping people with day in and day out for brain health?
There's a couple sides to it. And the one side is what I call the mental resource tank. And so your brain is like a tank of gas, and and when it operates, it pulls from that tank of resources. Mm-hmm. And by resources, I mean things like energy, neurotransmitters, enzymes. It's using these raw materials constantly. Okay. And so if it doesn't get the raw materials that it needs to produce those things in the brain to operate well, like a car needs gas and oil and all of those things, it just simply doesn't have the fuel it needs to operate. And then, what will happen is we'll get super fatigued, super foggy. Things will just stop working. We can't think straight. We can't make decisions. Yep. And so number one is you have to understand what the brain needs to perform well, and then build a lifestyle around it so that you are filling that tank as full of resources as you can, topping them up during the day. Because there's no real, I call it a tank, but there's no real storage tanks for these things. Each neuron is producing its resources as it uses them. It's like a just-in-time process. So the highway for these things is our bloodstream. And so when we hydrate, I recommend with electrolytes, which are the minerals that the brain uses, the neurons use to signal properly. Also glucose, which is the source of energy that the brain uses to make ATP, glucose and oxygen. And so we talk about complex carbohydrates for that, and that comes up through the bloodstream. And neurotransmitters, which are made from protein, which are, more specifically from amino acids. So all the things we think of as focus and alertness and calm and excitability and motivation and well-being, those neurochemicals are all made from amino acids. So if we're not getting enough protein, we don't get those things. And they have to be there all day long, especially when the brain is using them at a rapid rate. So the most important meals and the most important time to hydrate are from the moment that you wake up all through the day while you're using these things, because the brain uses its limited supply that it made overnight, and then it's looking for more raw materials to keep making more. And so the most important meals are breakfast and lunch, not dinner. And so night times when we want to kind of wind down. So there is an entire approach and lifestyle to hydrating, eating, how much food, when to eat it, the types of foods. You need to consider all the different macros that the brain uses: protein, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates to make these raw materials. And then exercise is critical. It increases circulation and gets these raw materials to the brain faster. It delivers oxygen faster, which the brain uses, amongst other things, to make the glucose. It also clears a lot of things that build up in the brain. Exercise helps to clear those. And then sleep. Sleep is a very underrated aspect of brain performance. There's while we're out, the brain is still working. It's got all kinds of functions it's doing at night, like consolidating memories, clearing out metabolic waste. It's like a car wash that's going on in there at night to help set things up properly for the morning. And you need a specific amount of cycles of sleep, 90-minute cycles. You need 4 to 5 of them a night. And if you don't get them all, your brain doesn't reset properly. So you're already starting the next day with a less than full tank. And a big part of that is the bandwidth. When you exercise your brain during the day with thinking and emotional reactivity, you're burning bandwidth. And at night when you sleep, it restores all that bandwidth and takes the sensitivity out of the brain. And if you don't get enough sleep, all of that isn't accomplished. And so you kind of enter the next day with a noisy brain that's not operating as well as it could. So that whole picture around lifestyle is non-negotiable if you want to optimize brain.
I love that. So some questions here on that. So that sleep, 4 to 5, 90-minute cycles, it's really, so 6 hours or 7.5 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody says you got to sleep 8 hours, but that's in the middle of a 90-minute cycle. So the books I've read and some people I've had on the podcast, that potentially 7.5 hours is better than 8. Is that fair?
Well, it's not just how many the cycles themselves, so the time, the temporal aspect of it, but it's the quality of those cycles. Like how deep are you going, the type of brain waves that you're getting within each cycle. So are you getting the restorative sleep within each cycle that you should get? And there's a lot of inputs that go into that. And it also, like, how fast do you fall into the deep sleep? So people enter sleep differently. Do you go right into a cycle when you fall asleep, or does it take you a while to get there? So really the length of time is more around how well do you get into the first cycle, what's happening in each of the cycles, and then at the other end, coming out of it. So it's a little more complex than just the amount of time.
Yeah. And then you talked about the neurotransmitters from amino acids, and you said focus specifically on protein. I know for me, I spent the last 3 months focusing on about 175 grams of protein a day, and it's hard to get that, right? So I just had this conversation with my business partner, Tim Hammett, this afternoon. How are you getting the protein, right? Is it Greek yogurt? Is it power sticks or whatever, meat sticks? It's your chicken. It's all the stuff, right? So what would you say to people there that are looking to, maybe if it's slim down or get stronger, that focus on protein? Why is that so important, and how do you focus on getting it throughout the day?
Yeah, and again, as I said earlier, the important times of the day to get it are earlier in the day. And so you're right, getting enough protein for breakfast and lunch can be challenging. What I do and what I recommend are shakes, because
Okay.
you can put anything into a shake. I consume all kinds of things that I would never eat as whole foods, but I'll do anything in a shake. So I'm
Yeah.
talking about beets, radishes. Like I would never eat any of
Right.
those carrots, but you put it in a shake and I'll drink it. And so that's a great way for me to kind of force myself to do the right thing. So anyway, in a shake, you can measure the macros. You can use protein powder.
Yep.
Eggs. You can use other types of protein in there. I use protein powder. Healthy fats. I pour a bunch of olive oil in there. Can't even taste it. Avocado. Nuts, seeds people put in there. Those are great for fiber also.
Yep.
Fiber is an important thing that slows down digestion. And then the glucose. So the vegetables and the fruit, making sure that they're complex so that they emit into your bloodstream slowly. But the beautiful thing about a shake is I make 3 to 4 days worth at a time, put them in mason jars, and they're just good to go. Pour it into a nice 16 to 20 ounce thermos, and I'm good for the entire morning. And because it's got fiber in it, I'm full. And then
Yeah.
for lunch, I'll have yogurt's a great idea, maybe some cottage cheese, throw a few nuts in there, throw some complex fruit in there, and you have another balanced, smaller meal to get you through. And I don't like to eat a lot at lunch because I don't want to get fatigued. So I
Yeah.
just make sure I'm snacking on just the right elements. I also will do an afternoon shake made up of different types of things. And so then at dinner, I'll have more whole food.
Got it. This is a random question, but my protein powder says do not put it through a mixer. So it's just more of a shake it or use one of those little frother things. So maybe I just got to get some different stuff, or if that's normal. Is that normal for protein powder, or you just let it rip?
Yeah, I let it rip. And you want to use more of an isolate protein, like a whey isolate, which is
Yep.
pure, because a lot of these things have fillers in them, and you want a good 25 to 30 grams with every meal, easily. And like you said, you're
Yep.
trying to get more. So like at lunch, you can add, whole proteins like chicken, other types of meats or beans, that type of thing to help up the protein count.
Yep.
Um, and lunch is really important because, as you go through your day, you're beginning to use these resources, use your bandwidth. And so the afternoons are super tricky for a lot of people because they start to fatigue. And so this food gets into your brain about 60 to 90 minutes later. And so you never want to eat once you feel fatigued and foggy. You have to back up and you have to say, well, I normally get fatigued and foggy at 2 o'clock. Well, then let's start eating at 12:30 so that we can kind of nip that in the bud ahead of time. And so that's really what I'm talking about. A brain first approach is you can analyze your entire day, hour by hour, knowing what you're going to do when. You can plan activities. Like I do all my hardest activities, thought-provoking, creative activities in the morning when my tank is full and my bandwidth is fresh. And then I begin to do less complicated things as the day goes on. But so then there's that resource spend side, but then there's also the resource supply side, which is making sure that 90 minutes before you feel like you may fatigue, you're planning your meals so that you head that off. Hydration all day long. I'm drinking tons of water, about an ounce for every kilo of body weight. So I'm 270 pounds, so I drink a gallon a day. And I drink it with electrolytes, a brand called Versus Nutrition, which has got the right amounts of each of the minerals that we need for the brain to function well. And I drink it all day long. Worst case, first thing in the morning and right at lunchtime before you eat, so that you're refueling these minerals that your brain needs for the neurons to signal properly. And then at nighttime, I begin to come off of the electrolytes and not worry so much about what I'm eating because, you want to kind of begin to wind down.
Got it. Awesome. Awesome stuff. Let's turn the page to a little bit about the brain of what I would like to call the roommate. I think a lot of successful people always pick this person on your shoulder, right? You got the guy over here, the guy or gal over here that tells you can conquer anything, right? You can build anything you want. You're a great business owner. You get the guy over here that's like, what are you doing? You can't do this. Like whatever the self-defeating thinking is, I think people have in their brains. How do you work with your clients and even yourself on to flick this guy off, get him out of here, he's negative, and focus on the positive guy?
Yeah, so this is the other side of the equation. We started with the mental resource tank, okay, setting up the proper lifestyle to give the brain the resources that it needs to function well, and then how to spend those resources by timing what we do during the day, etc. The other side is our mental experience, and that is the really cool part, right? Because the way the brain works is it predicts. So what happens is we go through life, every moment of every day, our senses are looking around saying what's going on around us, and it takes in that data. It consults the body and says, how do I feel at the moment? And it assimilates that data, and then it goes to its filing cabinets, its memory, past experiences, and says, what does this data tell me about what's about to happen? How meaningful is it? How threatening or safe is it? Etc. And then what patterns do we have in our past that tell us how to operate in this scenario? Okay. And then it pulls the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors forward from our filing cabinet. It picks the right one that it feels matches best and brings it forward into our consciousness and says, here's how you should think, feel, and act according to this set of data. Okay. So two people, you and I, could encounter the exact same set of circumstances, walk into the same room, and have completely different thoughts, emotions, and behaviors because our brains have different past experiences they're pulling from different filing cabinets. So here's the beauty. All right. So let's say that you encounter a situation and thoughts, emotions, and behaviors come forward that you don't like. They're not helpful. What do you call that one shoulder where it's telling you you can't do something or it's negative?
Yeah, self-defeating thinking.
Okay.
No, not really. It's just the self-defeating thinking. Well, I kind of do, but.
Okay. Let's call it the devil.
Yeah.
So if the devil's talking to you, that is what the brain predicted you should think, feel, and act in that way at that moment with that context based on that data. And so we can examine that and say, interesting, I wonder why my brain has predicted that now, and I don't like it. So the beauty of it is because of the way the brain is designed to change, adapt, and evolve through neuroplasticity, if we don't like something, we can change it. And ultimately, if we know how to work with the brain and how it's designed and how to create change in the brain, we can actually change it for the future so that the brain is going to a different part of the brain, different filing cabinet, and pulling a different thought, emotion, and behavior for the future so that we never have to experience the old one anymore again. That is the magic of neural re-architecture, creating new patterns in your brain, new thoughts, emotions, and behaviors and causing the brain to look at that new pattern through experiential exposure to it, like a gradual exposure. It has to see the evidence that it works better. And it's basically a hierarchy, a scoring system that the brain uses to see how well that pattern works for what it's trying to accomplish. And if you can demonstrate to the brain that new pattern through intentional architecture works better, has a higher score than the old one did, then the brain will automatically begin to migrate over towards it. But you have to show it evidence that it has a better score. Okay.
So how do you work on that? Like what's the practice behind that for somebody that's, driving down the road right now? Like, how do we apply that in today's world?
So what we would do is analyze where this pattern came from, the one that's not the devil's bringing forward, that's not
Yep.
helpful. And a lot of times they trace back to childhood, right? Things that we grew up with that tell us we're not good enough or this or that. So it's really helpful to understand the origins of these things so that we know why, so that we're not as overwhelmed by it. We become detached by it. We can look at things objectively and explain them. Okay. Very helpful. And then we loosen the grip. So a lot of these patterns are tightly woven into our psyche. They have high scores, predictive scores. And so because they're highly emotional, like if the devil says that you're not good enough, I can't do this, like that runs pretty deep.
Right.
And so it conjures a lot of emotion, right? And so like it runs to our core, our identity. And so that's pretty high on the scoring threshold. And so we need to do some work around dampening that score, bringing it down, showing the brain that, this is a highly costly pattern that you bring forward. It really makes no sense anymore in our lives. It made sense at one day, a long time ago, because we needed it to get through a situation, but now it doesn't make any. So there's exercises we can go through with the brain to help lessen its impact on the brain, loosen its grip, so to speak, take some emotional tone out of it. And then what we do is we sit down and we say, what need is the brain trying to meet with that pattern? And how can we sit over here on our own, away from the brain, and design a new pattern that's going to meet these same needs, but do it in a way that's more in alignment with how we want to be as a person going forward. So, we can say that, we are good enough. We have all this evidence that shows we are good enough. This is how we would like to think, feel, and act in the moment. And then once we have that pattern designed and show the brain, going through the checklist of what the brain cares about, that it works really well in these aspects, then we start to practice it. And so it really is as simple as, in all different ways, mornings are great for this, is setting up an environment where you practice this new pattern. You visualize being in these contexts. Public speaking, for example, is one that, people have a hard time with. So you can begin to practice these things, give the brain exposure to it, show it some evidence that you can do this, and that it meets your needs to do this. And if you start to give the brain, like anything else you would practice, whether it's your golf swing or anything else you want to become good at, you can practice these patterns to the point where the brain becomes good at them. And then it says,
natural.
wow. Then it says, wow, this thing satisfies a bunch of my needs. It makes me feel good about myself. I get feel good chemicals. Like this pattern is proving to be actually more useful than this other one that I was using to try to protect this. Because really what the brain is doing when it tells you you're not good enough is it's trying to avoid the situation so you don't get embarrassed. And so it's trying to protect your needs for skillfulness, for significance, for stability. And so what it does is it says, I'm not sure you can do that. You might fail. So let's just avoid it altogether.
Right.
And so that's the pattern that the brain comes up with to protect you. But if we don't like that anymore because we want to be good at it, then we have to demonstrate to the brain that we can be good at it. And it has all these other benefits to us. We're proud of ourselves. It delivers all these feel-good neurotransmitters. It opens up doors and opportunities for us to be able to do this thing. And then the brain will start to then predict to you, hey, you can do this. You've done it before. We've practiced it. I've seen you execute it. And so it delivers new thoughts, new emotions, and the skill that comes along with doing this because you practiced it and introduced to the brain that you're good at it.
Yep. Yeah, it's what I call the comfort zone callus, right? The more we do something, the golf swing to your example, you get calluses on your hand. The more we don't break through our comfort zone, the bigger the callus gets. And I think it's the daily practice of it, not just, hey, this is nice, let's try it here and there. I know for me to battle through anxiety and nerves and meetings and public speaking and the stuff that I do, it was just showing up, right? Jumping in the fire even when I didn't want to just get comfortable being uncomfortable. So do you agree with that?
100%. But it's really helpful to understand that the brain needs this and why it needs it scientifically in the process. You kind of figured that out. But if people out there understood how the brain was designed and what it takes for it to actually change, they would have a roadmap. They would have a strategy that says, okay, if I just do these things, I'm going to get there. And it just takes the anxiety out of the whole process. It takes the intimidation out of it, right? Because now you have a tried and true scientific backed neuroscience-based method that you can follow. And if you stick to it, because it's like anything else. If you go to learn a new instrument or a new language or learn how to play golf, like you're not expecting to learn it week 1 or week 2 or week 3. You get on the bike and you just stay on the path, and it's a never-ending quest to get better and better at these things. Same thing with pattern development. If you can live your life pursuing better patterns, recognizing ones that you don't like, thoughts you don't like, emotions you don't like, and have the toolkit to create new ones that the brain likes better, and you understand the methodology to show the brain why it works better, then you can recreate your entire mental experience. So it's like it's a meta skill.
Right.
You can architect ongoing your mental experience for the rest of your life and just become gradually, not all at once, but just over time, become better and better at having a more healthy, calm, fulfilling, happy mental experience.
Yep. When you think about success, I think I talk about this in business, but also even as a coach to my kids and their teammates, is anytime that we've been successful on, say, a basketball court, I've learned in business and in sports, you're most susceptible to failure right after that success, right? And I think we take our eye off the ball. You're not as committed. Some success happens, so maybe you don't get in as early tomorrow. Maybe you don't work as hard in practice the next day. So when you hear that, I mean, do you agree with that, and that somehow that people self-sabotage our own success?
Yeah. So the brain is all about repetition. And it's very much like working out our muscles. If we don't go to the gym every day, 2 weeks later, our muscles have atrophied. We've lost some strength, and we're just we don't have the physical capability that we did 2 weeks earlier. And so you recognize that with your muscles, that you kind of have to stay on it constantly. It's just a path you get on. It's a lifestyle. And so the same thing with the brain, but instead of training muscle fibers in the gym, we're training neurons in the real world. And so if you're not constantly repeating the same processes that lead to good results, reinforcing them, because these neural pathways that make up these thoughts and behaviors, when I say behaviors like athletic endeavors or anything else, they rely on repetition. These pathways, every time you do something, it fires electrically and chemically, and they get stronger like muscles would. And so, and the more time that you do them, the more times that you do them, the brain realizes that these are important to you, they're meaningful. And so it strengthens these patterns even more. And so to get these, to perform in anything, you want this stuff to be muscle memory. You don't want the brain to be hesitant or doubtful. You want to have executed these things over and over and over again so that it just fires automatically without equivocation. And so that's the same thing that with anything, public speaking. Like if you stop public speaking for a while, you would get up on the stage and it would be like you took two steps back, or you may find your footing, but you haven't done it in a while. So now all of a sudden there's an opening for the brain to begin to look for other patterns, maybe the ones that used to be there that had the self-doubt attached to them. And so the brain is uncertain, right? And that uncertainty is what you start to detect.
Yeah. Talk about our belief systems. I've heard before that, your belief system is formed really by the age of 13 to 15 years old. Number one, is that true? Number two, if it is true, what can the adult driving down the road that has a belief system that maybe is not the most healthy choice, right? How can they change that belief system?
Well, beliefs like, our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors are all patterns that we reinforce over time. And so all mental life is patterned. And the more times that we believe something, the stronger that belief gets. But like any other aspect of mental life, it can be re-architected, but it has to be shown to the brain and strengthened over time, and shown to the brain that we believe it more than we believe the old belief, right? And so all of this stuff can be re-architected if we suddenly feel that something different is more helpful to us.
How do we or talk about the neuroscience behind confidence? I think confidence is a big deal, and there's a very fine line between arrogance and confidence sometimes. But how does somebody build a bigger confidence, right? Like that chest up or chest out, chin up type mentality in their life?
So confidence is not something that you build; it's an outcome that happens through repeated action. So it's your brain basically looking at something and detecting no threat. So the brain is designed first and foremost to keep you safe and alive so that you can have babies and continue the species. That design was created hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it'll never change.
Yeah.
Number one to the brain is safe and alive. So it's always looking into the environment through your senses to say, is this situation safe or threatening? Okay. The more times that you can do something successfully, the less threatening it becomes to the brain, to the point where it could look at something like, playing golf in a tournament, public speaking, whatever. And if you do it enough times successfully, the brain has that as information. And so it looks at that context and says it's no longer threatening because you've demonstrated to it that you can execute over and over and over again. So as a byproduct of that, threat goes away, and what remains is confidence. Lack of threat, complete safety in the moment, no activation of the nervous system. It's like, you got this, right? And so the brain is not looking at it any other way than it knows that you can accomplish this.
So I think that's where it hit me right there is on putting. Like we keep talking golf, but like if I go out, like I'm very confident when it comes to business stuff and business decisions. I'm very confident in most part of my game of golf. But you give me like a 4-footer for par or a 6-footer for birdie, there's about 30% confidence there. And I want that to be like 70 or 80%, but it's also the fact of running a business and being a spouse and being a dad of 4. I don't go out and just knock out 6-foot putts all the time, right? So I'm not building the confidence. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, but it's also very context dependent. And so we would have to look at what in that moment you're interpreting that situation is, like why it's so different than the other parts of your golf game, because every stroke matters just as much, right?
Right.
And so we'd want to look at that specific context and say, well, what's happening in your brain? What needs are being threatened if you don't make that putt? And so we would analyze the pattern that's coming forward, the thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors, like what's happening in your body. Are you tightening up? Like there's something happening there. And then we would work on reinterpreting that, how we would like it to be. So right now you're probably looking at it as a threat that you're going to miss the putt, and that's going to mean something about you. But if we could turn it around and say, here's an opportunity instead of a threat, and begin to practice it enough in context where you're feeling the pressure, because that's probably part of it also, right? You're okay. And then begin to execute under pressure, then your brain begins to see that you can do it under pressure. So then the situation just becomes less threatening.
Got it. Talk about this event you have, the Napa Valley Brain Reset and Performance Experience. I thought that was really cool. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I do a lot of coaching with people, a lot of education. The basis of everything is here's how your brain works. And once you understand what's going on, then you can have agency and control in navigating it like you would the rest of your life, like your business, your golf game. Everybody wants control over their actions. And this gives you that. So I've been doing a lot of education and coaching for executives and professionals. But what I've found is that sometimes it's hard for people to dedicate a month or 2 months of their time to that type of thing. But they would really like to compress it into more of an experience, 3 or 4 day weekend. And so I live in beautiful Napa Valley, and it's just such a great place. People want to come here anyway. So I put together a retreat experience where couples can come in with their spouses and learn about the brain together while enjoying the wonderful things that Napa Valley has to offer. We do it in a really luxurious estate, great meals, private chef, massage, all kinds of nice accoutrements. But then we're also through a set of experiences learning about these brain first approaches to life. And so that by the time you leave, you and your spouse can go back and recreate this life at home and start to live life differently in a way that will be really meaningful to you in terms of your mental experience, your mental performance. And it's just a great way to absorb the information, get away, reset your brain, relax, and learn a whole new way to approach your brain and your life.
I love it. And where do people find more about that information?
Yeah, georgehaymaker.com. That's my website, and all the information's there.
Awesome. Well, George, thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success, man. This has been a lot of great information. I took a lot of notes and really appreciate it. We'll send people in the show notes to your website. I'm sure they can find you on all the social media platforms as well. So thanks for being with us on the Circuit of Success.
My pleasure, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.